Greetings to you. I am Sister Rita X, student of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, two great preachers of freedom, justice, and equality. To the Black man and woman of America and the Western Hemisphere, and to the Aboriginal people of the earth, the eternal leader of the nation of Islam, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the exalted Christ, and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the divinely guided reminder and mercy in our midst. These two great men of freedom, justice, and equality. They are a warner to the government and people of the United States and a warner to the nation of the earth. I greet you all with the greeting words of peace in the Arabic language of our fathers. Assalamu alaikum. To those of you who are not familiar with these words, it simply means peace be upon you. My subject today is who are the real children of Israel, part 2. Who are the real children of Israel, part 2. I am honored to have this opportunity to speak to our people, the Black man and woman of America, and the people of the world. I am honored, and I hope that whoever of those of you in the listening audience who are enjoying this message, please subscribe and hit the like button that you may know in the future when we go live. So, Black men and women, people of the world, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan asks the question, who are the real children of Israel? The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that Almighty God Allah revealed to him that the Black people of America are the real children of Israel. And we, Black men and women, are the choice of God. So, we ask this question, who are the real children of Israel? I think people of the world, Black man and woman, that because of today's time through DNA, we should ask the question and do a DNA on the Black man and woman of America to see if we are the children of Abraham, and those in Israel, those so-called Jews, we should do a DNA on them, since they claim they are the chosen people of God. Let's do a DNA test on them, since all of us watch Maury, and Maury is good now in doing DNA to determine if you the father or if you not the father. So they also can do a DNA to determine, are you really the children of Abraham, as the so-called Jews in Israel claim to be? So we should ask the question. We should elicit them to do a DNA on both races. So therefore, it will clear up the matter who are the real children of Israel. Because Black men and women, we are declaring that we are the seed of Abraham. We are the chosen of Abraham, who Genesis, the 15th chapter, the 13th, the 14th, the 15th verse describe as Abram know of a surety that thy seed would be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and they shall serve you and afflict you for 400 years. But after that time, I will come and judge that nation which had my nation in slavery. We, black man and woman, can find no other people who fit the description of the children of Israel who was in bondage for 400 years, but the black man and woman of America. So we ask the question, since we need to know now who is Satan, who is Shaitan, which is another name for Satan, we must discover who it is that Satan is talking about that must be made known. If the world must know who Satan is, we must understand that Satan is a person, and it is these so-called 10% who is hurting and affecting the 90% of the masses of the people. We must uncover them, expose them, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is doing. He is exposing and unmasking Satan. So, who is the 85%? Who is the 10%? And who is the 5%? We declare that the 10% is the rich, the slave makers of the poor, who teach the poor lies, to believe that the almighty, true, and living God is a spook and cannot be seen by the physical eye, otherwise known as the bloodsuckers of the poor. Who is the 10%? The 10%, and there's no colors with this number, black man and woman, people of the world. The 85% of the people are the uncivilized people, poison animal eaters, people who eat the whole. So we consider that to be a poison animal eaters, slave from mental death and power. People who do not know the living God or their origin in this world, and they worship that they know not, who are easily led in the wrong direction, but hard to lead into the right direction. Who is the 5%? The 5% in the poor part of the earth are the poor, righteous teachers who do not believe in the teaching of the 10%. Now, the 10%, they are the slave makers of the poor. So the 5% do not believe in the teachings of the 10% and are all wise and know who the living God is, and teach that the living God is the Son of Man, the supreme being, the black man of Asia, and teach freedom, justice, and equality to all the human family of the planet Earth. So it reads, because it is time the truth be made known, And there is an awakening now, and the liars are exposed, as it is stated and prophesied in Revelation 2, verse 9. It reads, I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blaspheming of them, which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. And in Revelation 3 and 9, it states, behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. So today we must unmask and uncover the 10% who is destroying the life of the 90%. You must understand that the 10% are Satan, and their desire is to destroy the 90% of the planet Earth. And there is no color of the 90%, because 90% of the masses of the people have been deceived by this 10% who claim to be the chosen people of God. And this is why Revelation, the Bible 2 and 9 and 3 and 9 have exposed these people and unmasking that they are of Satan and not of God. So, since we black men and women have come to the 250 years of America's history, we must understand and do some history on what happened, where it happened, and who it happened, that we must uncover and unmask the history of the 250 years of America. Black men and women, people of the world, study the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. The compromise of 1877 between who would be president, between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel J. Tilden, known as the Warmly Agreement, ended the Reconstruction era, and since 1818, the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. has played host to the world's social and political elite. An iconic hotel, often referred to as the residence of president. The Willard Hotel has welcomed United States President, foreign dignitaries, and celebrities, and has been the site of many historical monuments in the United States history for over 200 years. And it was at the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. in 1961 that Benjamin H. Freedman's speech at the Willard Hotel. Benjamin H. Freedman starts off saying, ladies and gentlemen, you are about to hear a frightening speech. This speech is an explanation of the plans now being laid to throw the United States into a third world war. Listen, black man and woman, the speech that Benjamin H. Freeman did in 1961, he was talking about America being thrown into the Third World War. He said, this speech is an explanation of the plans now being laid to throw the United States into a Third World War. It was made a short time ago before a large group in the congressional room at the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. Both the speech and the question and answer period later so electrified the audience that a group of patriots has transferred this information to two long playing records, which you may buy to play or you may Google, since all of us now, thanks to Steve Jobs, that he was able to put a camera in each of our hands, that you may now Google Benjamin H. Freeman's speech in 1961. Later, before, we used to have to go to the library. We used to have to dig through information to find out if truth is being told. But today, you have knowledge at your fingertips. All you have to do, take your phone, go to Google, and Google Benjamin H. Freeman speech in 1961. And you spell his last name for those who need more information. His last name is spelled Freedman. His first name is Benjamin. Google Benjamin H. Freeman speech in 1961. So Benjamin Freeman was in a congressional room at the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. And he noted that the speaker, Benjamin H. Freeman, noted authority on Zionism and all of its schemes. Benjamin Freeman is a former Jew who now converted to Christianity. Benjamin H. Freeman goes on to say, what I intend to tell you tonight is something that you have never been able to learn from any other source. And what I tell you now concerns not only you, but your children and the survival of this country and Christianity, Islam. Benjamin Freeman says, I am not here just to dish up a few facts to send up your blood pressure, but I am here to tell you things that will help preserve what you consider the most sacred thing in the world. The liberty and the freedom and the right to live as Christians, where you have a little dignity and a little right to pursue the things that your conscience tells you are the right things. Now, first of all, I would like to tell you that on August the 25th, 1960, that was shortly before election. Senator Kennedy, at that time, he was a senator. I'm speaking of President John F. Kennedy. But in 1960, he was a senator. And Senator Kennedy came before the United States and went to the New York and delivered an address to the Zionist Organization of America. In that address, to reduce it to its briefest form, President John F. Kennedy stated that he would use the armed forces of the United States to preserve the existence of the regime set up in Palestine by the Zionists, who are now in occupation of that area. In other words, Christian boys are going to be yanked out of their homes, away from their families, and sent abroad to fight in Palestine against the Christian and Muslim Arabs who merely wants to return to their homes. And these Christian boys are going to be asked to shoot, to kill these innocent Arabs, Palestinians, people who only wants to follow out 15 resolution passed by the United Nations in the last 12 years, calling upon the Zionists to allow these people to return to their home. Now, when the United States troops appears in the Middle East, where they are now, to fight with the Zionists as their allies to prevent the return of these people who were evicted from their homes in the 1948 armed insurrection by the Zionists, who were transplanted there from Eastern Europe. When that happened, the United States will trigger World War III. Now, Benjamin Freedmen saw ahead. He didn't know that in 2026 that America will be in the Middle East on the behalf of Israel, the Zionists, who lured the American people into war. They lured our president, Donald Trump, in Iran to go to war with those Iranians in the Middle East. Now, look how far ahead Benjamin Freedmen saw this. He and John F. Kennedy was speaking this in 1960 and 1961. He said that the Zionists were transplanted there from Eastern Europe. When that happened, the United States will trigger World War III. You say, when will that take place? The answer is as soon as the difficulty between France and the Algerian had been settled. That will take place as soon as France and Algeria have been settled. As soon as France and Algeria and the Arab world or the Muslim world has no more war on their hands with France, they are going to move these people back into their homes. And when they do that, and President Kennedy, send your sons to fight over there to help the crooks. See, in 1960, all the presidents knew that those Jews, those 10%, those people who are shaitan, that he knew they was crooks. And he said, when you send your sons to fight over there to help the crooks hold on to what they stole from innocent men, women, and children, we will trigger World War III. And when that starts, you can be sure you cannot emerge from that war a victor. We are going to lose that war because there is not one nation in the world that will let one of their sons fight with us, America, for such a cause. Benjamin Freedmen said he speaks to these ambassadors in Washington, D.C. and the United Nations, and of the 99 nations there, I have consulted with maybe 70 of them. And when we go to war in Palestine to help thieves retain possession of what they have stolen from these innocent people, we are not going to have a man there to fight with us as our allies. And who will these people have supporting them? You ask. Well, 4 days after President John F. Kennedy, or he was then Senator Kennedy, made that statement on August the 28th, 1960, the Arab nation called a meeting in Lebanon. And there they decided to resurrect or reactivate the government of Palestine. Not only that, they ordered the creation of the Palestine Army. And they are now drilling maybe 500,000 soldiers in that area of the world to lead these people back to their homeland with them. They have as their allies all the nation of what is termed the Banyan Conference Group. That includes, at that time, the Soviet Union and every Soviet Union satellite. It includes Red China. It includes every independent country in Asia and Africa, or 80% of the world total population. 80% of the world's population, 4 out of 5 human beings on the face of the earth will be America's enemies at war with us. And not alone are they 4 out of 5 human beings now on the face of this earth, but they are the non-Christian population of the world, and they are the non-Caucasians, the non-white nation of the world. And that's what we face. And what is the reason? The reason is that here in the United States, the Zionists and their co-religiousness have complete control of our government. Did you hear that? Black man and woman, people of the world. In the 60s, the ambassador, the government knew that the 10%, the bloodsuckers of the poor, Shaitan has control of our United States government for many reasons, too many and too complex. I'll go into here at this time. Benjamin Freeman said, the Zionists and their co-religionists rule this United States as though they were the absolute monarchs of this country. Now, you say, well, that's a very broad statement to make. But let me show what happened while you and I was asleep. Benjamin Freeman goes on to say, he said, we all were asleep. What happened? World War I broke out in the summer of 1914. He said 1914 was the year in which World War I broke out. Now, that war was waged on one side by Great Britain, France, and Russia, and on the other side by Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Turkey. What happened? Within 2 years, Germany had won that war. Germany not alone won it, but the German submarines, which were a surprise to the world, had swept all the convoys from the Atlantic Ocean. And Great Britain stood there without ammunition for her soldiers. Stood there with 1 week's food supply facing her. And after that, starvation. At that time, the French army had mutinied. They lost 600,000 of the flowers of French youth in the defense of Verdun or the Somme. The Russian army was defecting. They were picking up their toys and going home. They didn't want to play war anymore. They didn't like the czars, and the Italian army had collapsed. The Zionists in Germany, who represented the Zionists from Eastern Europe, went to the British War Cabinet, and the Zionists in London went to the British War Cabinet, and they said, look here, you can yet win this war. You don't have to accept the negotiation peace deal. You can win England this war if the United States will come in as your ally. The United States was not in the war at that time. They, the Zionists, told England, we will guarantee to bring the United States into the war as your ally to fight with you on your side. If you, England, will promise us Palestine. If you promise us Palestine. This was in 1914. The Zionists was asking England that if they drew England, America into war and helped England win this war, they was asked to sign a deal and that they were promised to give them Palestine after England win the war. In other words, they, the Zionists, made this deal. We will get the United States into this war as your ally. The price you must pay us in Palestine, after you have won the war and defeated Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Turkey. Now, England had as much right to promise Palestine to anybody as the United States would have to promise Japan. That's just like the United States promising Japan to Ireland for any reason whatsoever. It's absolutely absurd that Great Britain, that never had any connection or any interest or any right in what is known as Palestine, should offer it as coins of the ram to pay the Zionists for bringing the United States into war. However, Great Britain made that promise in October of 1916. In October 1916, shortly after that, the United States, which was almost totally pro-German because the newspaper here were controlled by Jews and the bankers were Jews. All of the media of mass communication in this country were controlled by Jews. And they were pro-German because their people, in the majority of cases, came from Germany. And they wanted to see Germany lick the czars. The Jews didn't like the czars, and they didn't want Russia to win this war. So the German bankers, the German Jew, Kohl and Loeb, and the other big banking firms in the United States refused at that time to finance France or England. Now, since we are at the 250 years history of America, black man and woman, people of the world, we must study history to see what happened and how, if we do not be careful, we will repeat history over again. So, the German bankers, the German Jew, Kohl and Loeb, and other big banking firms in the United States refused to finance France or England to the extent of $1. The Zionists stood aside and they said, as long as France and England are tied up with Russia, not 1 cent. But the Zionists poured money into Germany. They fought with Germany against Russia trying to lick the Tsar regime. Now, those same Jews, when they saw the possibility of getting Palestine, they went to England and they made this deal. At that time, everything changed, where the newspaper had been all pro-German, where they would been telling the people of the difficulties that Germany was having fighting Great Britain commercially and in other respects. All of a sudden, Germans were no good. They were villains. They were Hans. They was shooting Red Cross nurses. They were cutting off babies' hands. And they were no good. Well, shortly after that, President Woodrow Wilson declared war on Germany. The Zionists in London sent these cables to the United States to Justice Brandeis. Go to work on President Woodrow Wilson. We are getting from England what we want. Now, you go to work and you go to President Woodrow Wilson and get the United States into that war. And that did happen. That's how the United States got into World War I. Now, the World War in which the United States participated had absolutely no reason to be our war. So it is, as we see in 2026, that Israel went to our President Trump, and told him a lot to get America into war in Iran. And just like now, we had no reason to be in that war. We were railroaded into it. The United States were suckered into that war, merely so that the Zionists of the world could obtain Palestine. So before I go on, let me say this. The Zionists, the 10%, they are Shaitan. Look, Caucasian people, you that are not Jews, they consider you Gentiles. And they don't respect you, white man. They don't respect you because they call you Gentile. They said they have a right to put usury on you. They have a right to spit at your church. Anyone that is not a Jew is considered a Gentile. So you Caucasian, when you learn who this 10% really is, really are, the Shaitan of Revelation 2 and 9, 3 and 9, you will run them away from us. They are destroying you, your babies, the black man and woman, the people of the world. They have no loyalty, only to the Jews that call themselves Jews in Israel. So let's go on. The United States were suckered into that war, merely so that the Zionists of the world could obtain Palestine. Now, that is something that the people in the United States have never been told. The people in the United States never knew why we went into war, World War I. Now, what happened after the United States got into the war? The Zionists went to Great Britain and they said, well, we performed our part of the agreement. Let's have something in writing. That shows that you, Great Britain, are going to keep your bargain and give us Palestine after you win the war. The receipt took the form of a letter, and it worded in very cryptic language so that the world at large wouldn't know what it was all about. And that was called the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration was merely Great Britain promised to pay the Zionists what they had agreed upon as a consideration for getting the United States into war. So, people in my listening audience, if you like what you hear, hit the like button. Consider the streaming and tell your friends and family that you are receiving this information about the history of the 250 years of the United States and how it is our duty. It is your duty, black man and woman, people of the world, white America, that you say you love America, to save this country and do not allow the 10%, the Zionists, the Shaitan of the world to destroy our way of life. So the Balfour Declaration was merely Great Britain promise to pay the Zionists what they had agreed upon as a consideration for getting the United States into the war. So this great Balfour Declaration that you hear so much about is just as phony as a $3 bill. Now, that is where all the trouble started. The United States went in the war. The United States crushed Germany. Now, when the war was ended and the Germans went to Paris, to the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, there were 117 Jews there as a declaration representing the Jews, headed and headed by Bernard Baruch. Benjamin H. Freeman said he was there, and he ought to know. Now, what happened? The Jews at that peace conference, when they were cutting up Germany and parceling out Europe to all these nations that claimed a right to a certain point of European territory, the Jews said, how about Palestine for us? And the produced for the first time to the knowledge of the Germans this Balfour Declaration. So the Germans for the first time realized, oh, that was the game. That's why the United States came into the war. And the Germans for the first time realized that they were defeated. They suffered this terrific reparation that was slapped onto them because the Zionists wanted Palestine. And they, the Zionists, were determined to get it at any cost. When the Germans realized this, they naturally resented. Up to that time, the Jews had never been better off in any country in the world than they had been in Germany. You had Mr. Rockner there, who was maybe 100 times as important in industry and finance, and is Bernard Baruch in this country. You had Mr. Ballin, who owned the two big steam lines ships, North German Lloyd and Hamburg. American lines. You had Mr. Blanchard, who was the banker for the Khazar family, who had the Warbirds in Hamburg, who were the big merchant bankers, the biggest in the world. The Jews were doing very well in Germany. No question about that. Now, the Germans felt, well, that was quite a sellout. It was a sellout that I can best compare. Suppose, as an example, the United States was at war today with the Soviet Union, and the United States was winning. And we told the Soviet Union, well, let's quit. We offer you peace terms. Let's forget the whole thing. And all of a sudden, China came into the war as an ally of the Soviet Union and Russia, and throwing them into the war brought about the United States defeat, a crushing defeat with reparation, the likes of which man's imagination cannot encompass. Imagine then, after that defeat, if we found out that it was the Chinese in this country, America, our Chinese citizen, who all the time we thought they were law citizens working with us, were selling us out to Russia. And that it was through them that Red China was brought into the war against us. How will we feel in the United States against Chinese? I don't think that one of them would dare show his face on any street. Imagine how we will feel. Well, that's how the Germans felt towards these Jews. The Germans said we had been so nice to them. And from 1905 on, when the first communist revolution in Russia failed, and the Jews had to scramble out of Russia, the Jews all went to Germany. And Germany gave them refuge. And Germany treated them, the Jews, very nicely. And here the Jews sold Germany down the river for no reason at all, other than they wanted Palestine as a so-called Jewish commonwealth. Now, Nahum Sokolov, all the great leaders, the big names that you read about in connection with Zionists today, they in 1919, 1920, 1921, 1922, and 1923, Germany wrote in all their papers, and the press was filled with their statements that the feeling against the Jews in Germany is due to the fact that they realized that this great defeat was brought about by our intercessors and bringing the United States into the war against them. The Jews themselves admitted that it wasn't that the Germans in 1919 discovered that a glass of Jewish blood tastes better than Coca-Cola or Minshein beer. There was no religious feeling. There was no sentiment against those people merely on account of their religious beliefs. It was all political. It was economics. It was anything but religious. Nobody cared in Germany whether a Jew went home and pulled down the shade and said, Shema Israel or our Father. No one cared in Germany any more than they do in the United States. Now, this feeling that developed later in Germany was due to one thing, that the German held the Jews responsible for their crushing defeat for no reason at all, because World War I was started against Germany for no reason, for which they, Germans, were responsible. The Germans were guilty of nothing, only of being successful. They built up a big navy. They built up world trade. You must remember Germany at the time of Napoleon, at the time of the French Revolution. What was the German Reich? Consisted of 300 small cities and states, principality, dukedoms, and so forth. 300 little separate political entity. And between that time, between the period of between Napoleon and Bismarck, they were consolidated into one state. And within 50 years after that time, they became one of the world's great power. Germany, their navy was rivaling Great Britain. They were doing business all over the world. They could undersell anybody and make better products. And what happened? What happened as a result of that? There was a conspiracy between England, France, and Russia that we must slap down Germany because there isn't one historian in the world that can find a valid reason why those three countries decided to wipe Germany off the map politically. Now, what happened after that? When Germany realized that the Jews were responsible for their defeat, they naturally resented it. But not a hair on the head of any Jew was harmed, not a single hair. Professor Tinsdale of Georgetown University, who had access to all the secret papers of the State Department, wrote in his book and quoted from a State Department document written by Hugo Schoenfeld, a Jew who Cordell Hull sent to Europe in 1933 to investigate the so-called camps of political prison. And Hugo Schoenfeld, a Jew, wrote back that he found the political prisoners in very fine condition. They were in excellent shape. Everybody treated well. And they were filled with communists. Well, a lot of them were Jews because the Jews happened to be maybe 98% of the communists in Europe at that time. And there were some priests there and ministers and labor leaders, masons and others who had international affiliation. Now, the Jews sort of tried to keep the lid on this fact. The Jews didn't want the world to really understand that they had sold out Germany and receiving reparation to this day from Germany. And that the Germans resented that. So, the Germans did take appropriate action against the Jews. The Germans, shall I say, discriminated against them, the Jews, wherever they could. So, black man and woman, people of the world, we are about to go to part 3. We have ended our series of Who is the Chosen People of God, part 2. We thank you for tuning in. And if you like what you have heard thus far, hit the like button and turn on your notification So therefore, you will be notified the next time we come to this air to speak to you on Sunday from 7 Pacific Standard Time, and for those on you on the East Coast, it's 10 p.m. on Sunday Pacific Time. So Eastern Time, pardon me. Again, I am honored to be before you. I desire that those of you in the listening audience pick up your phone. Go and research Benjamin H. Freedman 1961 speech. Those of you who study, go to Revelation 2 and 9. Go to Revelation 3 and 9. Why is the Bible saying those who say they are Jews are not, but are the synagogue of Satan? They are the Shaitan. They are the ones who is destroying the whole world, because Satan ideal and Satan says if they go down, they will take the whole world down with them. So they have no kind of fight into this. Their mind is already made up. We say to the Caucasian people who are not Gentile, do not be deceived by the 10% who say they are Jews. They have as much as respect for you as they do the black man and woman, as they do the Palestinian, as they do the people of the world. So when you, the Caucasian people, begin to see who this 10% is, who is amongst you, who's hiding, and is Shaitan, and you unveil him, unmask him, then the world will live a better life and humanity will be saved. Look, if you have any questions, you may ask my leader, Minister, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. You may go to hashtags, X question Louis Farrakhan. Hashtag X question Louis Farrakhan. We will see you next week, same time, same place. Thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum.